So basically today in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, we are online, on our online services, we publish a story based on an essay research written by a Martin Luther King biographer named David Garrow, which kind of details in full salacious detail sexual encounters in which Martin Luther King Jr. supposedly, allegedly had in hotel rooms across the country with up to 40 to 45 women.
Late last year, the historian David Garrow, who has written biography of Martin Luther King Jr., contacted us and said that he was going to have a major piece that he had culled from the FBI's files that were now available about Dr. King. We thought about whether we'd want to use that piece. It was a tough decision. Ultimately, we decided not to. And the reason was not complicated. We were not going to be able to verify the facts that he had in his piece ourselves. We were going to have to rely on him. And when it comes to journalism and the kind of journalism that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution produces, we worry a lot about making sure facts are checked, facts are verified. So we passed on the piece. There were some other practical concerns about timing and the length of the piece, but what it came down to was the inability to verify the information ourselves.
But there's some very salacious stuff in it. It talks, as I mentioned, it talks about affairs that he allegedly had. It talks about a rape that he allegedly witnessed. It talked about orgies. It talked about gospel singers who we all know and love, who were apparently involved in some of these activities. So we felt there was a duty as the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, although the information was initially published in Britain, because it was published by David Garrow, who's a noted Martin Luther King biographer. He won a Pulitzer Prize in 1987. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution invited him to sit on a panel marking the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s death. So he is a legitimate historian.
There isn't much question about Garrow's ability and his reputation as a chronicler of Martin Luther King's life. But he is a historian, and what we practice at the AJC is journalism. And what makes this so difficult is many of the people mentioned, many of the incidents, they're decades old and virtually impossible to verify. We also know that at the time, the FBI was interested in hurting Dr. King's reputation and in spoiling his ability to lead the civil rights movement.
Now, the context in which these tapes occurred, they were all done between 1963 and 1966, which is right in the middle of the COINTELPRO program by the FBI. And the COINTEL program was basically a program in which the FBI infiltrated organizations, particularly African-American organizations, anti-war organizations, black officials. So you got the Black Panther Party, you got the Nation of Islam, you got the Southern Christian Leadership Coalition, you got the NAACP. These are all organizations that were targeted by COINTELPRO. Martin Luther King Jr., being the leader of the civil rights movement, was the #1 target. So there were tons and tons and tons of instances and accounts in which the COINTELPRO bugged Martin Luther King Jr. They bugged his house, they bugged his hotel rooms, they bugged his office. They had people working in the SCLC who were working for the FBI. So they were on Martin Luther King hard. And initially they were on him to try to figure out his communist ties. So the sexual stuff came about. And you got to understand that, the FBI with the COINTELPRO has been a very, very unreliable source of protection for African Americans for years, going back to Marcus Garvey. So you got to look at that information in that sense as well. You got to say, okay, this is information about these 40 women and these rapes, but they're coming from the FBI, and we can never trust the FBI, is what black people are saying. So that's another thing you got to think about. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to kind of re-examine, or to examine the life of Martin Luther King Jr. and examine how we want Martin Luther King Jr. personally to be remembered and looked upon as a figure, as an American figure.
Many of the source documents will not be available until the year 2027 based on a judge's order. When 2027 comes around, a lot of people will be interested in listening to those tapes and reading those transcripts. But until then, we'll have to depend on historians who can sift through the material. In the case of Garrow, he has largely relied on FBI memos that summarize those transcripts and summarize tapes that were made of King. And I think the debate about Martin Luther King's behavior, about his legacy, and about what Americans should think of him will go on for a long, long time.
No, I just want people to read the story, kind of read it with an open eye, read it objectively. It's on ajc.com. If you have any thoughts, or you can email me, esuggs@ajc.com. But read it carefully. Make your own judgments on it. We have the link to the full essay on the story. We have several sidebars written by Ty Tagami, Rosalind Bentley, and Sheila Poole. So we have a whole team of reporters working on this. So it's a big story, and we try to tread lightly on it. We try to be very delicate with it, understanding the sensitivity of the subject, and we hope that readers will understand that.